Today we are so happy to welcome back Reverend J. Atkinson to lead our service. Reverend Atkinson retired in 2011 after 32 years in Unitarian Universalist ministry, most recently 12 years in Studio City, and before that 13 years in Davis. During those ministries, he served at various times on the adjunct faculties of our UU seminaries, Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, and the Starr King Unitarian Universalist School for the Ministry in Oakland. So before turning to professional ministry, Reverend Atkinson did research in nuclear physics for 12 years. He now lives in the Bay Area and holds a position as research scholar at Starr King School with a focus on history. As a scholar, a preacher, and activist, Reverend Atkinson continues to focus on UU history, social and economic justice, process and relational theology, and the local congregation as a pluralistic community of mutual teaching and learning. So welcome, Jay. And I would now like to invite Reverend Atkinson up to light our chalice here in the physical sanctuary. And if you are on Zoom and you have a chalice with you, we invite you to share in this sacred ritual with us. May these shared lights unite us across distance in love and intention. Our chalice lighting words this morning come from Lao Tse. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in our home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. We light this chalice with hope of finding peace in our hearts this morning.
Our light is often in danger of going out. That's why we're here. We gather in this place of peace, and let its silence heal our spirits. Come then into this place of memory, and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power, and let its vision change your heart. O spinner, weaver of our lives, your loom is love. May we who are gathered here be empowered by that love to weave new patterns of truth and justice into a web that is strong, beautiful, and everlasting. Come, let us worship. And I invite you, as you are willing and able, to join in our opening hymn, and your former interim minister, Elizabeth Solle, for inviting me to be here with you this morning. And I apologize to those of you who are expecting one of your former interim ministers, the Reverend Joy Atkinson, whom I am not. I am Jay Atkinson, although Joy and I have been receiving each other's mail for more than 40 years. And I am glad to be here with you this morning. My reading for you this morning comes from this book, Proverbs of Ashes, which is partly written. It's written by Rita Nakashima Brock and Rebecca Ann Parker. And some of you know that Rebecca Parker was president of Starr King School for the Ministry for about 24 years, from 1990 until 2014, a long I think she held the record for seminary presidencies in the United States. It's not a position that people tend to remain in for a long time, so she gets credit for that. Before she became president of Starr King, Rebecca was a Methodist minister serving a small Methodist church in the Puget Sound area. And many of the stories from this book, Proverbs of Ashes, come from her experience as a pastor in that small Methodist church. And this is one of the stories that she tells. It was the early 1980s, and anti-gay sentiment was heating up in our city. On the national scene, our denomination was preparing to pass legislation that denied ordination to those who were lesbian and gay. Chuck, a gay man, and Pat, a lesbian woman, in our congregation, came up with an idea for what our congregation might do in this climate. Both of them were active in the church, making important contributions to its life and ministry. But they'd kept a low profile about their sexual orientation. They were only out to me and a few of their friends in the church. Chuck worked for the school district, where he would be fired if it were publicly known that he was gay. There were no legal protections in place for him. They wanted to see the church take a proactive stance in support of lesbians and gays. I liked their idea and invited them to present it at the next board meeting. Tuesday night came around. After preliminary business was taken care of, the board chair called on Chuck and Pat. Each of them came out to the board and told what it was like to be a gay person in a society where the presence of gays was not welcome. They explained how much the church meant to them, how they wanted its fellowship to be more available to all in the gay community. Then they proposed that the church start a support group for lesbians and gays, and that we publish a welcome in the local papers, especially the gay press. The first response was thundering silence. No one said a word. Then Cecil, the lay leader of the congregation, stood up. Cecil had known poverty as a child and the sting of being called poor white trash. He had quit school after the 8th grade to go to work. He was a tough survivor, a self-taught man. The tattoos on his arm were from his years in the Merchant Marine. No one ever stood up at board meetings. The meetings tended to be informal. But Cecil cleared his throat to make a speech. "The Bible is perfectly clear on this question," he said, speaking with firmness. I held my breath. I had no idea where Cecil was going with this. Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as yourself." And as far as I know, he put no restrictions on who our neighbor is. I move that we do as Chuck and Pat have proposed. There will be some in our church family who will not understand such an action. It will not fit with their understanding of what it means to be a Christian or how they read the Bible, and we will lose our relationship with them. But if we do not do this, we will lose our relationship with God. Then he sat down. The board members began to talk. They told personal stories about whom they had known and how the church had stood up and protected them in the past. They talked and they talked and they talked. Finally, someone said, "Let's vote." The vote was unanimous in favor of the proposal with one abstention. The board asked me to preach a sermon the following Sunday announcing the decision. It was the first Sunday in Advent. The lectionary text, the standard biblical text for that day, was from the first letter of John. Whoever says, "I am the light," while hating a brother or sister, is still in the darkness. Whoever loves a brother or sister lives in the light. Whoever says, "I am the light, I am in the light," while hating a brother or a sister is still in the darkness. Whoever loves a brother or sister lives in the light. Just as we so often today sing our familiar hymn, "Love Will Guide Us," that biblical text was what guided Cecil in that little Methodist church 45 years ago. For me, Cecil is the model of someone who deeply knows what is right and what the true foundation of the church is. Maybe he understands fear and prejudice. Maybe he even has some of it himself. But he doesn't let that sway him from what's more deeply important. He keeps his eyes on the prize. He stays focused on what I would call the soul or the sacred identity of his church. For him, the Bible and the life of Jesus keeps him reminded of this church's soul or sacred identity. How does a church lose its soul? In that story of Cecil's congregation, people were initially moved by their personal fears and prejudices before Cecil called them back to their best selves, their better selves, maybe their better angels. Their reaction of stunned silence is typical of what happens when someone reminds you what you already know is deeply true, but from which you have strayed. But what if Cecil had not been there and said what he said? A congregation can go badly astray, not only through fear or prejudice, but by misunderstandings or petty disagreements, greed or lust for power, or simply avoiding conflict and discomfort. And if they do, they are in danger of losing their souls. It was loss of soul that derailed Christianity itself when, after 300 years of persecution, Christian leaders got into bed with the Roman Empire and turned their backs on the life and the message of Jesus. They turned their backs. And as a result, Christian self-understanding became lastingly scarred. They embraced a God of violence, indeed an entire theology of violence. Think of the near genocide that the Christian Crusades waged against Muslims in the Middle Ages. Think of the thousands of so-called heretics, some of them our own early Unitarian ancestors, who were tortured on the rack or burnt at the stake for their beliefs. And it's not just a thing of the past, of course. We see this all around us in today's climate of religious bigotry and Christian nationalism. In an issue of the Christian Century newsletter last fall, a Christian minister named John Pavlovitz wrote, "We are experiencing a national poverty of empathy in this country, and sadly that deficit is evident in organized Christianity more than anywhere. It seems that many of the loudest people are the ones who have most passionately embraced a theology of cruelty, exclusion, and malice, one that bears no resemblance to Jesus. Instead of being known for empathy and love for diverse humanity, many self-identified Christians are obstacles in bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice." And let's not be smug. We Unitarian Universalists have not been immune from that kind of sin. I would remind you of those Unitarians in New England back in the early 1800s and up to the 1860s. Unitarians of that era were largely controlled or influenced by wealthy Boston Brahmins, huge financial supporters of Unitarian churches in those days, many of them owners of textile factories whose income flowed from cheap cotton picked by enslaved human beings. Monetary greed could indeed powerfully seduce some of our ancestors from what they claimed to believe or the notions of equality that they claimed to value. And so for Unitarian Universalists, if it's not the Bible, what is it that keeps us grounded, what keeps us in touch with the deepest meanings of our lives, of our sacred identities, of our religious tradition itself? How do we, as individuals and congregations, avoid getting sidetracked by fear or prejudice or petty concerns that are unworthy of our loyalty? How do our UU churches stay focused on what's most truly and deeply important? Well, a religious congregation like this one or any other one exists for a purpose. It exists to be and to do something. And most of our UU churches express that purpose in a mission statement, words that remind us of what we intended to do when we founded this or some other congregation, and why it is that we continue to commit our time and our treasure and our loyalty to its ongoing well-being. You all know about mission statements. Maybe you even know your congregation's mission statement. I looked on your website. You approved your board of trustees, actually, apparently not the congregation itself, approved the current mission statement on March 1st, 2007. Well, that's a while ago. But also on your website, I found something much more recent, which I think is therefore maybe more important. A vision statement that all of you revised last year. The vision statement says, spiritually alive, lovingly inclusive, and justice-centered. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Okay, good. It's a vision that invites all people of goodwill into your religious community, offers a communal life to awaken and to nourish their and your spirits and souls, and then turns outward to do the work of the world. It's a good vision statement. We don't belong to a UU church like this one or any other one, after all, to boost our own egos, or to go on power trips, or to act selfishly against the good of the whole. The church has a purpose, a mission, that lifts up our eyes to a higher vision, one that digs deeper into the meaning of our lives. These are soul matters, matters of sacred meaning and identity. And the same, I think, is true of our nation. Just 2 days ago, we marked our nation's 249th birthday. We remember those soaring phrases of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, that when any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. And finally, the closing affirmation of the Declaration. For the support of this Declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Less remembered, perhaps, is the long middle section of the Declaration, the list of grievances lodged against George III. Remember any of those? Here are just a few. He has obstructed the laws for naturalization of foreigners and refused to pass others to encourage their migrations hither. He has made judges dependent on his will alone. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has cut off our trade with all parts of the world. He has deprived us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury. He has transported us beyond seas to be tried for pretend offenses. Wait, was that then or now? Those are some of the grievances that moved our Unitarian ancestor, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Saint Waldo, to recall the beginnings of the Revolutionary War in his Concord hymn. By the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmers stood and fired the shot heard round the world. We know that many people on both the political right and the left remember those words and others like them and look up to and honor American ideals with sacred reverence, however differently different people may see them in practice. And especially since last summer, we've heard a lot about saving the soul of America. Twice in his farewell address, Joe Biden spoke of the soul of our nation and of the torch atop the Statue of Liberty. We, as a religious movement, have our own torch, our chalice, our flame. In that way, the analogy between church and nation is symbolized again in the warmth and image of a flame, either lifted high or cupped in the protective embrace of a chalice. And this is not a new thing. Back in the 1920s, the British essayist and social critic G.K. Chesterton traveled around America for a couple of years, and when he got back, this was just after World War I in the 1919, 1920, and when he got back to Britain in the first chapter of his 1922 book, What I Saw in America, Chesterton wrote, "America is the only nation in the world that is founded on a creed. That creed is set forth with dogmatic and even theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence, perhaps the only piece of practical politics that is also great literature. And he went on a few sentences later to emphasize the point when he wrote that the United States is a nation with the soul of a church. Soul of a church. This way of thinking about our national identity suggests that there's some similarities between the way that we protect and save the soul of a church and the soul of a nation. Just as with a church, a nation, as a nation, we need ways to remind ourselves of what the American experiment is all about. If churches remind themselves of their deepest purposes by looking to their mission statements, then I would say that our nation, like our churches, also needs a mission statement to keep it from losing its soul. So, what is our national mission statement? When I was first working on this sermon, I asked my wife, Ariel, if she knew what America's mission statement was. Her suggestion was to go boldly where no one has gone before. Well, actually, there might be a little bit of truth in that because we were the first of all the settler colonists to rebel against European rule. And we were also the first nation ever to have a written constitution. In 1787, the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia gathered on May 25th, I think, and came out after almost 4 months on September 7th. And there's a legend that as Benjamin Franklin emerged from the doors and started down the steps, a woman in the crowd shouted, "Well, Mr. Franklin, what kind of government have you given us?" And Ben reportedly replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." A lot of us fear that we haven't kept it, or if we have, it's hanging by a thread these days. As our nation approaches its 250th birthday next year, we find ourselves in a kind of midlife crisis. We learn again and again how fragile a thing democracy is, how fragile a thing civilization itself is. And I do think our country has a mission statement. It was written by those men, they were all men, in those 4 months sitting in Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It's right there in the preamble. And as I read it, it looks like a pretty good mission statement. And I bet some of you can recite it with me. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And there you have it, in 6 great visionary purposes and phrases, rooted in 6 aspirational values: unity, justice, peace, security, well-being, freedom. Now, of course, mission statements or lists of values in nations, no less than in churches, are useless if we never read them, if we don't go back and renew our memory of them from time to time. Checks and balances, as our nation founders knew, are useless unless they operate under some commitment to the common good. They require leaders who live and govern with honesty, integrity, and respect for others. Those same virtues that we celebrate when we think of our ideals. Leaders who govern with humility and goodwill, who would care for the people's well-being, who would understand their own positions and duties as sacred responsibilities. What if we truly made use of those phrases in the preamble the Constitution? What if every piece of legislation, every judicial decision, every administrative rule and regulation were to be judged against whether it perfects the union, establishes justice, ensures domestic tranquility, and so on? Compare that idea with what we have now. A capitalist value system that seeps into nearly every aspect of our lives, replacing kindness with competition, moral integrity with greed, concern for the common good with an ideology of unregulated power for the wealthiest. What is happening at the highest levels of our federal government strikes at the very root of democratic process. The motive power of capitalism is self-interest. Adam Smith clearly recognized this back in his book, The Wealth of Nations, back in, what was it, 1776 that was published. What a coincidence. He imagined that self-interest and greed would somehow be self-corrected by what he described as the operation of an invisible hand. We now know and see around us how profoundly mistaken that theory was. Capitalism without any outside regulation becomes a monster without a soul, a monster that pursues not happiness for all, as the Declaration of Independence says, nor the common good, but the amassing of wealth and power for the few. We are living through such a time as that now with a vengeance. So how do we save our souls, as individuals, as religious communities, as a nation? I look to this flame burning here in the chalice and think of all the ideals that it stands for. Is it too sappy to think that somehow a politics of love could be our salvation? I think of Cecil's reminding the people of his church that love of neighbor is fundamental. And I think also of the action last June at our UUA General Assembly, when UU congregations voted to declare that love is at the center of all that we do. We are indeed living in a dark time. But the Sikh activist, that's Sikh, S-I-K-H, the Sikh activist Valerie Kaur, asks us to look beyond the present moment and push forward with what she calls revolutionary love. What if our present moment can give birth to a new era of revolution? What if our present darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? And she's very explicit in this feminine imagery. She says what we have to do is breathe and push and keep breathing and keep pushing. This is not an easy battle that we are up against. Already lawsuits are moving through the courts, as you know, and some of the worst actions have been at least delayed. Our Unitarian Universalist Association back in February joined with 28 other national religious bodies to sue multiple government agencies for the intimidation of people exercising their freedom to worship in safety. And I hear from my colleagues in the Washington, D.C. area that some of their members, largely government employees, are cautious about being seen in worship. The intimidation is clearly there. How long will it take before millions of working people who cast their votes for Donald Trump will realize, as David Brooks wrote a few months ago in his New York Times column, that their supposed hero, quote, doesn't give a crap about the working class? Well, it's happening already, as you know. A month ago, I was marching with thousands of people in downtown Oakland on No King's Day, while Donald Trump was busy exposing himself in an obscene military parade. And just last weekend, I was at the San Francisco Pride Parade, shouting down the homophobia and the transphobia that pollutes our federal administration. How long will it be before masses of people, including many of us, I hope, both as victims and allies, are out on the streets, not by the thousands, but by the millions and millions, protesting against the lies, the cruelty, and the monstrosity of the bill that Donald Trump put his signature to just last Friday afternoon? Justice, says Cornel West, is what love looks like in public. And our call is to make that transformation of love into justice visible, powerful, irresistible. Like Cecil, we need to keep our eyes on the prize, not be lured away by false promises or easy ways out. Our challenge is to become communities of protest, communities of resistance, communities of action, communities that rise up and shout, "We're mad as hell and not gonna take it anymore." And to do that, we need solidarity. We need organization. We need inspiration. Inspiration to keep ourselves focused, uplifted, renewed, and full of determination. Sometimes I think it is the poets who will save us, who will, with the power and the eloquence of their words, call us to renewed vision and action, call us out of fear and comfort into courage and discomfort of placing our minds and hearts and bodies on the line for what must be done to save our souls. That's what Walt Whitman did. It's what Harlem Renaissance poet Langston Hughes did. It's what Lawrence Ferlinghetti and Maya Angelou and Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks did, and so many more. And so in the spirit of all those prophetic poets, I close with the words that brave young woman and poet Amanda Gorman spoke at Joe Biden's inauguration 4 years ago. Maybe you remember some of them. "We will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the West. We will rise from the wind-swept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, recover, and every known nook and cranny of our nation and every corner called our country, our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge, battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for always there is light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it." And I say, amen. May ever it be so. Oh, we have a hymn to sing that I hope will pick up on that, the spirit of those words.